This isn't hype anymore. This is ignition. Because Caitlin Clark didn't just drop another highlight. She didn't just sign another deal. She didn't just make another logo 3. She just forced the entire sports world to pay attention. Welcome back to Her Hoops, where we don't tiptoe around the truth. We say it loud, we say it clear, and we say it whether people are ready or not. Caitlin Clark is on fire right now. And not in the hot streak way, in the changing the direction of the sport way. In the span of days, Clark did 2 things that explain everything about the future of women's basketball.
Caitlin Clark has had an interview with a Chinese YouTuber, a content creator, and the future of women's basketball, what lies ahead, became a topic, became a question. And she answered that question. I think it's interesting, and I think we should check it out. The other thing, of course, that happened yesterday, I did a video on, and somehow the basketball gods, the sports gods aligned, and I literally had that video out like less than an hour after the ad came out.
She sat down with an international creator and spoke openly about where the women's game is headed. No drama, no politics, no buzzwords, just clarity. And second, Nike finally unleashed the ad everyone knew was inevitable, the From Anywhere spot, the one that went nuclear the moment it aired. And here's the uncomfortable truth. This wasn't just a commercial, it was a statement. Nike didn't put Caitlin Clark on primetime by accident. They didn't debut that ad during peak sports viewing because it felt right. They did it because they know something a lot of people still refuse to admit.
If I remember correctly, it aired in the 3rd quarter of the Cowboys-Redskins NFL game. And I figured I said it in the video, I figured that's why this ad dropped yesterday, was for the NFL and NBA slate. Of course, the NBA, yesterday's basically their biggest day of the year outside of any finals games. And then, of course, the NFL had a lot of people's sole attention.
Caitlin Clark is no longer just a star. She's a center of gravity. Ratings move when she plays. Tickets disappear when she's in town. And now brands are finally acting like the women's game deserves more than leftovers and excuses. But here's where the tension lives. Because while Clark is opening doors, not everyone seems comfortable walking through them. Some want to downplay her impact. Some want to spread the credit so thin that it means nothing. And some still pretend this moment would be happening exactly the same way without her.
Sports broadcast I've ever seen. It was embarrassing for a standalone holiday event. That second game, the production was a lot better. Drew Brees was so much better in his commentary. So, Indiana Fever superstar Caitlin Clark has already made a massive impact on the growth of women's basketball, has experienced over the last few years. In fact, she, along with several others, because my God, y'all can't not name somebody else.
And Caitlin Clark knows it. What she said about the future of women's basketball wasn't flashy. It was dangerous because it put the responsibility back where it belongs. Visibility, opportunity, and respect. So before we break down that interview, before we dissect why this Nike ad hit harder than anything we've seen in years, and before we talk about what this means for the WNBA going forward, make sure you like, subscribe, and stay locked into Her Hoops. Because this story, it's bigger than one player. To understand why this moment matters, you have to understand how rare it actually is.
While there have been popular players and well-known names in women's basketball before Clark came on the scene, there's no question her global renown is unprecedented when compared to her peers. Clark's global name value holds a lot of weight when compared to some of the biggest men's basketball players. There's no question that Clark in women's basketball as a whole still has a lot of room to grow and evolve.
Women's basketball has always had talent, elite talent, championships, dynasties, legends. But what it hasn't always had is unified attention. Before Caitlin Clark, stars came in waves, respected inside the game, celebrated in pockets, but rarely breaking through the larger sports conversation. They were great players in a system that never fully knew how to amplify them. Then Clark showed up and broke the rhythm. She didn't just score, she didn't just win, she changed behavior. People who hadn't watched a women's game in years suddenly knew tip-off times.
There's also no question that Clark continuing to succeed on and off the court will be crucial to the sport reaching its potential. So, Clark interviewed with a Chinese bilingual content creator, Tailfair Tong, okay, which was published on their YouTube channel on December the 26th. At one point in their discussion, when Clark was asked,
arenas that used to rely on giveaways started selling out. And broadcasts that once buried WNBA games found themselves reshuffling schedules. That doesn't happen by accident. So when Clark sat down with a bilingual international content creator and was asked about the future of women's basketball, her answer was telling. Not because it was radical, but because it was simple. More opportunities, more visibility, more access. Not slogans, not arguments, just exposure. Clark talked about young girls seeing the game up close, about being able to watch players they idolize, not through clips, but in real time, about the power of television, travel, and global reach. And here's the key part. She framed herself as the stage, not the savior, not the victim, the platform. That's confidence without ego, and that's rare. Because Clark understands something critical. Inspiration doesn't happen in theory. It happens when kids see what's possible and believe they're allowed to chase it. That belief doesn't come from speeches. It comes from screens, seats, jerseys, and moments. And that's why the Nike timing matters. Because while Clark was talking about visibility, Nike was showing it. Dropping that "from anywhere" ad during peak sports hours wasn't just marketing, it was validation. It was Nike saying, "This belongs here." Not as a favor, not as a trend, but as a centerpiece. The irony? People are asking why it took so long. And that question exposes the real drama. The women's game didn't suddenly become valuable. The audience didn't suddenly appear. It was always there, waiting for someone impossible to ignore. And now that someone exists. Let's break this down cleanly, because none of this is random. Step 1. Caitlin Clark becomes unavoidable. Not just in women's basketball, in sports. Her range stretches defenses past logic. Her confidence stretches conversations past comfort. And every time she pulls up from the logo, she reinforces the same message. This game doesn't need to be explained. It needs to be watched. Step 2. The numbers follow. Viewership spikes. Ticket demand explodes. Social engagement multiplies. This isn't vibes, it's data. Networks notice, sponsors notice, and eventually, brands that move slowly realize they're behind. Which leads to step 3. Nike finally moves. The "from anywhere" ad didn't work because it was flashy. It worked because it was honest. No forced empowerment angle. No overproduced monologue. Just Caitlin Clark doing what she's done her entire career. Shooting from distances that feel disrespectful to geometry. That simplicity is what made it lethal. And when that ad aired during a window dominated by the NFL and NBA, the most crowded sports attention space imaginable, it wasn't drowned out, it cut through. People shared it. Other brands reacted to it. Fans demanded more of it. That's how you know it landed. Step 4. The message syncs with the moment. Earlier, Clark talked about access, visibility, being seen. And then Nike delivered a visual that said, "You see this? This is the product." That alignment matters, because women's basketball doesn't need rebranding, it needs amplification. And here's the part that makes people uncomfortable. None of this works without a central figure. Movements don't grow without faces. Leagues don't scale without stars. And pretending otherwise has held the WNBA back for years. Clark isn't the only talent, she isn't the only reason, but she is the accelerator. And accelerators expose friction. The praise gets louder, the pushback gets sharper, the expectations get heavier. And suddenly, the same people who wanted growth start arguing about how much growth is acceptable and who should get credit for it. That tension? That's the real story. Because when one player forces progress this fast, the system has to decide whether it's ready to keep up. Here's where things get uncomfortable, and honesty starts rubbing people the wrong way. Everyone says they want the women's game to grow. Everyone says they want visibility. Everyone says they want respect. Until growth actually shows up with a name attached to it. Because the moment Caitlin Clark became the focal point, the conversation shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't about exposure anymore. It was about distribution. Not whether the spotlight should exist, but whether it was being shared correctly. That's not an accident. That's insecurity meeting inevitability. The truth is, sports ecosystems don't grow evenly. They surge around moments, players, rivalries, and narratives. The NBA didn't explode because everyone was equally marketed. It exploded because stars were allowed to be stars. But in the WNBA, there's this strange hesitation, this fear that elevating one player somehow diminishes the rest, as if attention is a limited resource instead of a multiplier. Caitlin Clark didn't create that tension. She exposed it. And the Nike ad poured gasoline on it. Because once a brand like Nike plants its flag, there's no pretending this is just a phase. There's no arguing this is hype without substance. The market doesn't lie, and it definitely doesn't spend millions on charity cases. So now you see the contradictions. People demanding more TV time while criticizing the player driving ratings. People calling for sponsorships while questioning why brands pick the most recognizable face. People saying the league deserves more attention, but bristling when that attention has a center. And through all of it, Clark hasn't taken the bait. She isn't campaigning. She isn't clapping back. She isn't lecturing anyone about credit. She's hooping. She's showing up. She's letting the work speak. That restraint is exactly why this moment feels bigger than basketball. Because Clark represents a shift, from pleading for space to claiming it, from explaining why women's basketball matters to showing that it already does. And the league has a choice. Lean into the momentum, or dilute it in the name of comfort. Because history is clear on one thing. When a sport finally gets a breakout figure who connects globally, the worst thing you can do is pretend it happened by committee. This isn't favoritism, it's physics. And Caitlin Clark is pulling the entire conversation toward her, whether people like it or not. If you strip away the noise, the debate, and the politics, what's left is basketball. Technically, her game breaks assumptions. Her shooting range isn't just deep, it's strategic. Defenses have to pick her up the moment she crosses half court, which stretches spacing in ways most teams aren't built to handle. That changes rotations. That changes help defense. That changes how entire schemes are designed. And that kind of gravity doesn't show up in box scores. What makes Clark different isn't just the logo threes, it's the confidence to take them early, often, and without hesitation. That mentality forces defenders into mistakes before the ball even leaves her hands. It speeds them up. It pulls them out of position. And suddenly, the floor opens up for everyone else. That's star impact. But the personal side matters just as much. When Clark talks about her childhood, about playing wherever she could, about watching idols up close, about how access shaped belief, it explains why she carries herself the way she does now. There's no performative humility, no forced edge, just clarity. She understands the assignment. She knows that every camera angle, every interview, every road game is part of something bigger. And instead of running from that weight, she's leaning into it, calmly. That's why the Nike ad hit the way it did. It didn't try to sell you on her story. It assumed you already knew it. It trusted the audience to recognize greatness without being spoon-fed meaning. And that trust is rare, especially in women's sports marketing, where brands often overcorrect with messaging instead of letting performance lead. Clark's presence allows brands to simplify again. No slogans, no justifications, just results. And here's the part that doesn't get said enough. This kind of influence doesn't come from manufacturing. You can't force a player into this role. The audience has to choose them first. They chose Clark. Not because she asked, not because she demanded it, but because when she steps on the court, the game changes shape. And once fans feel that shift, once they associate excitement, confidence, and must-see moments with one name, there's no going back. That's why this moment feels permanent, not because of hype, because of alignment. This is where Caitlin Clark's rise stops being just about her and starts becoming a referendum on the WNBA itself. Because moments like this don't come often. When a player crosses over from league relevance to cultural relevance, The window is short. Capitalize, and you change the trajectory of the sport. Hesitate, and the momentum bleeds out. Right now, the WNBA is standing in that window. Clark's visibility has already done what years of campaigns couldn't. It's pulled new eyes into the ecosystem. Casual fans, international fans, young fans who don't care about league politics. They care about excitement, and excitement is currency. Every sold-out arena, every national broadcast, every viral clip creates leverage. Leverage for better TV deals, leverage for higher salaries, leverage for deeper investment across the league. But only if the league allows the moment to breathe. The mistake would be treating this as a trend instead of a turning point. Because cultural growth doesn't come from balance, it comes from peaks. Icons create entry points. Rivalries create loyalty. Stars create memory. And once fans are inside, then the ecosystem expands. The women's game has spent years trying to convince people it deserves attention. Caitlin Clark flipped the script by making attention unavoidable. And that's why this matters beyond basketball. Young girls aren't just seeing representation, they're seeing dominance. They're seeing confidence without apology. They're seeing a player trusted by the biggest brand in sports to carry a campaign on performance alone. That sends a different message. It says excellence doesn't need translation. It says women's sports don't need permission. It says the future doesn't ask, it arrives. But here's the challenge. Moments like this expose who's ready for growth and who's comfortable with stagnation. Because growth demands structure, support, and vision, not just celebration. The league, the media, and the brands all have a role to play. You don't slow this down. You don't dilute it. You build around it. Because if Caitlin Clark is proof of anything, it's this. The audience is already there. They're watching, they're sharing, they're buying in. The only question left is whether the system is willing to meet them at that level. Say continue when you're ready for Section G, the closer. So here's where we land. No hedging, no qualifiers. Caitlin Clark didn't ask to be the face of this moment. She didn't campaign for it. She didn't demand it. She earned it. Through range that bends defenses. Through confidence that never shrinks. Through performances that force conversations whether people want to have them or not. The From Anywhere Nike ad didn't create this moment. It confirmed it. It put a corporate stamp on what fans already knew. Caitlin Clark isn't a future bet. She's a present force. And when she talks about the future of women's basketball, notice what she doesn't do. She doesn't complain. She doesn't blame. She doesn't frame the game as lacking. She talks about opportunity, visibility, access. Because deep down, she understands the truth. When people see greatness up close, belief follows. Attendance follows. Investment follows. Culture follows. That's how sports grow. Not through arguments, not through guilt, not through dilution, through moments. And this is one of them. The WNBA now has a choice. Lean fully into the momentum or keep pretending lightning strikes don't matter. Because this isn't just about Caitlin Clark hitting threes from the logo. It's about a league finally being handed a bridge between niche respect and mainstream relevance. You don't slow that down. You don't apologize for it. You protect it. History doesn't remember who tried to spread the spotlight evenly. It remembers who stepped forward when the moment demanded clarity. Caitlin Clark stepped forward. Now it's everyone else's move. And if you're still questioning whether this matters, ask yourself why the biggest sports brand in the world chose this player, this moment, and this message. That wasn't charity. That was recognition. So keep watching. Keep paying attention. Because the future of women's basketball isn't coming quietly. It's pulling up from the logo, from anywhere, and daring the world to keep up. If you're rocking with real hoops conversation, real momentum, and real impact, make sure you're locked into her hoops. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop your take in the comments, because this story, it's only getting started.